Okay, welcome everybody. We're going to get started. We're kicking off our executive functions for every classroom by Mitch Weathers Book Club today. And I am thrilled that so many of you could join us live here. And many others have texted me or emailed me that they're sleeping because they're in Dubai or that they're picking up kids. So I understand and appreciate you all, whether you're watching this live and participating with us or you're joining in on the replay later. But I'm so glad you're here. And this is a really special event. Let me introduce myself quickly and then I'll hand it over and introduce you to Mitch, our star of the show tonight. But my name is Sybil Hall. I am an educator first. I have taught in 5 different countries, 23 years in pre-K through 6th grade. I was an instructional coach for 8 of those years. My last school that I was at was the International School of Brussels. And then we moved back here, so I didn't get to introduce myself in the chat, but I am currently in Denver, Colorado now. We repatriated, brought the kids home to do high school here before heading off to college. So I've got a daughter in college at CU Boulder, 2nd year, a son, senior year in high school. My husband's a science teacher at his high school. We were like, we're going to do the international life, but in America. We're going to all work and go to the same schools still. But really, I just wanted to share with you, I got into this book club thing and running this community because I wrote my own book. My last year, I was teaching 5th grade at ISB, and like many of you, probably feeling pretty burnt out after COVID. And so I decided to do something different and creative, and I wrote a book, and it's called Burn Bright Not Out, 35 Lessons That Cultivate Teacher Well-Being. And so suddenly here I was in this like educator author world, and I was like, I need to figure out how to get this book out into the world and connect with other authors. And so kind of pretty organically, I started connecting with a lot of other educators that were also writing books and sharing them with the world. And so I started leading these book clubs, and people in the community started leading the book clubs with me. And I was like, this is a really great way to stay connected with international education, keep learning myself. And at the same time, I really want to help teachers burn bright and not out, and in their personal lives as well as work. And so my community used to be called Teachers Need Teachers, but I renamed it the Burn Bright Club because I really want it to be a space where we do both together, because I think we need to live a pretty simple, basic, happy life to do that, because the teaching job is pretty daunting and big, but really certainly rewarding, isn't it? So anyway, that's a little bit about me and how I got here and why I'm doing this with you. Um, and I had the pleasure of Mitch joining our group and participating. And so I reached out to him and I said, Mitch, let's do a book club about executive functions for every classroom, because I had also been to a few of Mitch's classes and webinars. I don't know, have any of you guys been to any of Mitch's classes and webinars? Yeah, you probably see some familiar faces here, huh, Mitch? Some super fans, as we call them. So I, like you, can't get enough. And I'm always wanting to improve my own executive functioning skills, my own children's, and all of the learners I work with. And so here we are. So I'm going to be leading this 6-week book study with you. After Mitch teaches us a little bit and we ask and answer some questions, I'll kind of walk you through what the book club is going to look like real quickly at the end of the call, and then off we'll go and studying it and learning together about this amazing book. Sound good? Yeah? Okay. So Mitch is an educator himself. He's an author himself, founder of the Organized Binder, and I'm going to just hand it over to you, Mitch, and kind of let you give yourself an introduction here.
Okay. Thanks, Sybil.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to see some familiar faces on the call or names if you don't have your camera on. And I was thinking as kind of a kickoff, I would share my screen, go through some slides, kind of uh, maybe take 20 or 30 minutes on a little lesson. I'll move as quickly as I can. Certainly won't get through everything. And if you've been to any of my classes before, some of this might be a second time for you. So that's always good. Sybil, can you update for it'll allow me to share? There should be a little up arrow. You see that? And it'll say allow multiple.
You should be
There it
good
goes.
now.
Okay. But not to assume you do know me. Let me give you a little introduction to me. I'm based in Northern California. I now hail from Sacramento and I spent most of my time in the classroom anyway at Sequoia High School in Redwood City, which is in the Bay Area of Northern California. Um, and in that time in the classroom, I designed a program called Organized Binder, which is a system or a vehicle to support the development of executive functioning skills in students. And I have the absolute privilege of having a team, and myself and my team get to work with schools around the country, as well as internationally now. And one thing that started happening almost from the beginning of creating Organized Binder and starting to collaborate with schools outside of my own was the individual teachers and parents would write in and want to purchase the program. And there's a materials component. I'm actually going to show you an Organized Binder to kind of for the sake of clarity. Some of you have seen them. But, because there's a materials component, I just am kind of morally opposed to selling the program to individual teachers. And so uh, I didn't really, that never sat with me, both the having to say interface with schools and districts, let's see if we can make that happen. All the while the teacher saying, I just want to bring this work to my classroom. And so um, what I did with book one, the book that you're all engaged in, is tried my best to one, I hope that you find, and I think some of you, just by looking at the names and faces on the call, some of you might have already read it, or are in the process, but I really tried to make it as practical and relevant as possible for teachers in grades 3 through 12. And even it's applicable for college as well. Corwin just works with K-12. So um, and what my goal was unpacking the strategies that are inherent to the Organized Binder program. In other words, kind of what I'll do with you today a little bit is like, okay, if I don't have that, the training and the support and materials, what would it look like for me to iterate and bring these strategies to my own classroom, um, in light of this knowledge in the book? And that's what we're going to be engaged in this book today. I get to meet back with you at the end, which I'm excited for that. As a background knowledge about executive functioning, the book study that you're focusing on is we're looking at higher order executive functions. But there's two categories or domains. There's the core EFs. You can see their working memory, inhibition, and cognitive flexibility, sometimes referred to as shifting as well. And the reason this graphic that we built it this way is that the higher order EFs that you're going to be focusing on and learning about um, in the coming weeks are really built on those core EFs. Of course, there's interplay between both, but just to kind of guide your attention. And the reason I bring that up is if you happen to be, I mean, you can see the book today, it says grades 3 through 12. But if you happen to be a primary teacher, K through 3, um, I just finished book two and sent it to Corwin last week for our first draft. So I don't want anybody to feel left out, even in this book, saying I think there's a lot to be gained from book one. But I co-authored book two with a friend and colleague of mine who spent her career in first grade. And we've kind of taken a deep dive and translated book one into K1, 2, 3 with an effort of really spanning K through 12. So if there was a district or a K-12 school that wanted to engage in this work, um, start to end, that would be possible. So that's the goal. I just want to give you some focus, but what you're focusing on is higher order EFs. And I like to frame this, forgive me, I'm a geology undergrad. And so I have an affinity for maps and compasses and rulers. And if you've heard me talk, I always start with this analogy because I think it helps frame the case for executive functioning quite well. That, if we consider a student's educational journey over the course of a school year as analogous to equipping them with a topographic map and a compass and a ruler and a pencil and everything they would need to navigate their way to that destination. We'd pick that destination on the map and we'll call that destination academic success. And we would first start by figuring out where we are on the map because you can't really navigate or triangulate your way anywhere if you don't know where you are first. But once we've done that, then we would set out together on the journey with this child over the course of the school year, right? Navigating our way towards academic success. And you might ask in this era of education technology and AI and generative AI, like, why not just plug it into some app or technology like a GPS and let it take us there? And as I mentioned, I get the privilege, I hope I mentioned this, working with schools um, kind of all over the place. And I can say this very confidently, it doesn't really matter what continent it is or even what grade level, that the students, either that I'm getting to observe and work with, or teachers are reporting back that there just seems to be an increased amount of executive dysfunction or dysregulation in the classroom. And in this analogy, it would be as if the students, they have their compass, their ruler. We've equipped them with everything they need, the devices and resources to navigate their way towards success. But if they if they're experiencing that as if they are out backpacking or they're out where they would need a map and a compass on, but they're so far out that there is no GPS, there is no signal for them to rely on. And although we have equipped them with these devices and resources, and dare I say that we over equip students at times, if they lack the basic know how, the basic skills and habits to employ and utilize those technologies or resources or devices that we've equipped them with, it's just more stuff that they have to carry on their journey. And that's where a specific set of higher order executive functions come into play, that they lay the foundation for learning. And these six in particular are going to frame the book that you're engaging in. Some, like working memory, gets more than one chapter, and self-regulation is spread throughout all of them because everything I'm going to talk about today and everything you read is promoting self-regulation, self-regulated behaviors. And you'll see some definitions in the book that, they are these mental processes that enable us to plan, focus attention, remember instructions, juggle multiple tasks. When you think about all of those things, those are kind of behaviors that as educators we want to see manifest in students. And although executive functioning, it is this mental process, we can actually see in the brain where that is happening with executive functioning. But what we're really looking for is behaviors that students are demonstrating in the classroom. Like, for example, do I know how to learn to get and stay organized? How do I demonstrate goal-oriented behavior? How do I learn to manage my time? Like, these are things that we want to see students develop this sense of studentness, right? And I want you to think for a moment is like, what do you think of? We don't have time to enter a discussion, but when you think of a young person that's developing this sense of studentness, what comes to mind? What are those adjectives? What are those behaviors, ways you would describe that student? Because what I see is a student that has a sense of like agency, like like I know how to do school, like I got this, right? And if you don't have that sense of studentness, the classroom can be kind of a lonely place because students who may feel like their education is happening all around them, like they're a passive object in this process, um, can look around and there's other kids that seem to know how to do it, that have this sense of studentness. So when I think of executive functioning, I think of a sense that's developing or a student that's developing this sense of studentness. And this table, way too much to read, and it's not referenced in book one. But I want to make this point and give you all absolute massive kudos for being here and engaging in this book study and learning about equipping and supporting the development of executive functions because we know that executive functioning skills are not academic in nature, right? They're the things we use every day in life. But look what the research has shown. That if I could just draw your attention to the aspects of life column, the impact that these can have on young people over the course of their life is it's just mind-blowing. This is just some of it. This is just a screenshot I took to share with you. But of course, you can see there school readiness, school success, but some of these other things, it's really incredible when you look at the impact these have on them. If you're taking notes, and you're going to see a lot of these quotes in the book, but if you're taking some notes, I'd like you to write that word studentness down. And the second word I'd like you to write down is environment. And the way Paul Tough frames it is spot on that if we can improve a child's environment in specific ways that lead to better executive functioning, we can increase their prospects for success in a particularly efficient way. And what I love about this dialogue, this conversation, is every one of our environments as educators is different. You might be a school leader in the book study, you might be a teacher. I gave a talk at a district and they had the facilities and transportation department there. Like, what's the environment look like for you, and how do you start to shape that environment in ways that lead to better executive functioning? And if you happen to be a teacher on the call, here's some good news for you. These are not taught. So, in other words, you're not having to find time to fit in lessons on executive functioning and teaching executive functioning skills. They're not taught. They're best learned when students clearly see them modeled and practice them as a byproduct of engaging in a routine. That is the key to the whole book. That's kind of the thesis of this work. I refer to them as the three keys: clarity, modeling, and routine. Okay. And again, that comes as good news because this isn't anything extra for a teacher to teach. We already have enough to teach and not all that much time on our hands, right? I want to give you a native Hawaiian language lesson. And some of you have heard me talk. You've done this with me, and I'm not going to make you say it because we don't have time. But in Hawaii, it's an interesting district because the entire state, all the islands taken together, are one district. And we work with schools on multiple islands. And over the course of the last few years, I've had multiple educators come up to me and say, "Hey, there's a native Hawaiian expression that sums up this approach to equipping students with executive functions. And it's called makahana kaike. That's the way you'd say it, makahana kaike. And the first few times I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And after like the third or fourth educator, I was like, I have to commit this to memory because it really is true that the way this native Hawaiian expression is translated is that the knowing is in the doing. That there's actually things in life that humans learn by doing, and that the knowledge is actually found in the action. And that's where that good news is. So when we look at these executive functioning skills, these higher order, we want to give students practice with them as opposed to me didactically or verbally teaching you about them and the importance of them and the impact they can have on your life, right? We want to get to that maka hana kaike. Here's another thing I've thought about and unpack on book one that you'll see. I've never met an adult that thinks it's a bad idea for young people to practice these, right? Or have exposure to them. And yet, historically, we've left them up to chance. And you could pick any of these, and I have evidence for this everywhere I go. It was New Mexico last week. I was in New York City the week before, and I was in Minnesota the week before that. And with these groups of educators, it's true everywhere I go. I ask one question. I'll have them pick any of these executive functioning skills. And well, the one that was last week was planning and time management. And I said, okay, in this group, and I think there was maybe 100 people in the room, and I said, raise your hand if when you were a young person, a caring adult gave you a calendar or a planner and showed you how to use it, and then kind of walked that journey with you over the course of a school year, aka held you accountable for learning to manage your planner. And there was like three hands that went up in the room. And that's true of anywhere I go. And then they put their hands down, and I ask, of course, the rhetorical question. Well, raise your hand if you think time management is an important skill for students. And of course, everybody's hand goes up. So why in the world, if it's something that important, that we leave it up to chance? Not to blame anybody, because I've thought a lot about this when I was writing book one, because it perplexed me. And I think I figured it out that one, I mentioned this already, you're never going to find a teacher with extra time on their hands. We don't have enough time in the school day. We don't have enough time in the school year. We don't even get to choose when we go to the bathroom, right? So even if I wanted to teach these skills, where am I going to fit it in? Okay. The second is what I describe in the book as a zone of genius. And I tell the story of going into my mom's second grade classroom, and you could walk in and you could just feel it. Like she just did that well. She taught second grade her whole career, and you could sense it was her zone of genius. What may have not been my mom or a teacher's zone of genius is how do I meaningfully incorporate goals that have like a daily action item that families and myself can check in with kids about? Or how do I give students opportunities, as many as possible, to flex their working memory through retrieval practice? Because we know that's what increases long-term retention of the things we're learning. Like I want to do that, but maybe I'm not sure, and I already don't have enough time. And they get left up to chance when we look in the classroom context. But the good news, and if I had to go out on a limb, and we can maybe chat about this at the end of today or when we meet back up, is that you're probably seeing signs of executive dysfunction in your classroom or at your school, if I had to guess, right? Or in your home. This is the good news. And this is in particularly true with the higher order executive functions, that they're trainable and can be improved at any age. Repeated practice is key, right? And so when we look at these three keys and what the book's framed around, that routine play piece, that last one is that's the whole point, is that's what's going to give students this repeated practice with these executive functions. So Sybil, what I thought I would do is unpack these three and then pause, and we want some time for Q&A and book study explanation. Does that sound okay?
That sounds great. Yep.
Okay. Okay. And as questions come up, put them in the chat, write them down. Don't forget them. We'll get there. I'm going to show you some organized binder stuff. Um, has nothing to do with organized binder. The book has nothing to do with organized binder, but the book has it too. And it's trying to get you to think, okay, here's one way it looks. If I don't have access to that, what might it look like in my classroom or at my school or in my environment? How would I iterate on that? Okay. Um, I love this line. When we talk about clarity, what's clarity mean in the classroom? Ambiguity is the enemy. Any successful change requires a translation of ambiguous goals into concrete behavior. You remember when I started, I say we're talking about these executive functions, these cognitive processes, but we're really looking for that behavior, right? So in short, to make a switch, you have to script the critical moves. And what that means in an organized binder, or said another way, I love Lisa Delpit in her book, Other People's Children. It'll literally change your life if you haven't read it. But we must be careful not to remove the very explicitness that the child needs to understand the rules of a new classroom culture. How do we bring about clarity? How do we reduce the ambiguity, increase the clarity, and make things explicit? And for me, what I wanted to do, and I worked primarily with multi-language learners, and I realized early on in my career a mistake I was making is I was relying almost exclusively on verbal communication. And there was an equity issue there because if I was in a heterogeneous classroom, students for whom English is their primary language have no cognitive load, no mental bandwidth taken up trying to translate everything I'm saying, everything they're reading. But if they're sitting next to a student for whom English is not their primary language, they're having to use a significant amount of their mental calories just to keep up with the instruction, right? And so I have less available to focus on my what I'm trying to learn and managing my behavior and staying focused because some of my working memory capacity um, is infringed upon. We call that a cognitive load. If we have time, we'll get to it. You'll see it in the book. So what I wanted to do is have my routines and my expectations so clear that I didn't even have to use words. And so each of these tabs, if you popped it open, we call these system files, and you can see they have the same color and the same letter. Colors mean nothing. It's totally arbitrary. It's just for nonverbal visual cueing, other than the goal setting, because I wanted students going for the gold, right? Goals. Those letters you see there, I quickly realized, and I should have realized this earlier, to be honest, as a biology teacher, not all kids see color the same. And some kids, boys in particular, might be completely colorblind. And so you might be seeing shades of gray, which may not be as helpful as those colors. So I added the letters. So even if you are seeing different gradations of gray, you can follow along with the different letters. And the whole point here is each of the steps of the routine, so clarity modeling routine, we're in a different place in the binder. So when I turn to this page, this happens to be a concluding routine. It's a fifth or sixth grade classroom in Denver, Colorado. There's no question about where we are. In fact, that's a student binder under a document camera, but look at the other binders in the classroom. They're right there on the white weekly lifeline. The one in front of it's gold, the one behind it's green, right? So there's a lot of clarity happening all just by nonverbal visual cueing with color coding and letters. So my expectation, for example, how we start class, I didn't have to use words. There was absolute clarity. And until I brought that kind of clarity, I had no business holding students accountable, right? And well, I unpack that in some detail in the book. So when we look at modeling, there's two things, and I quote this in the book for sure. In moving to college and career readiness for all, we must teach some skills formerly learned by students on their own. That's what we're seeing. And if the pandemic has put an exclamation point on anything, that's the truth. But again, I'm empathetic. Where do we fit that in? We don't have enough time in the first place. So good news is they're not taught, right? But we do need lessons. All students need lessons and modeling of study and work skills like time and task management, etc. So when I talk about modeling, there's always got to be a class sample. So what if I'm expecting you to have a organized binder or whatever it's called, then I have to be able to do the same because I can't have an expectation on you and then I can't see it. And we've just started year 2 with a school in I forget where it was, but I was meeting with the team last week, and this is really what they realized in year 1 of the rollout is they weren't being consistent with the modeling. So there was an expectation, but there was no modeling. So students like you need to have your table of contents and get organized. Well, how do I do that? If what does that look like, right? And I'm starting to get disorganized. So that class sample model is really important for me to see. But there's something else that happens that I want you to consider. So here's a teacher in this is in Ventura, California. It's a charter high school, and he's starting the lesson. And I can see that because his class sample binder is under the document camera, and he happens to be lucky enough to have nice penmanship. It could use it. So he's literally updating the binder in process with them through parallel process. And if you can do that, your class sample is always there. It's always being updated with students, absolute clarity. But something else starts to happen if students all have the same portfolio. And this is what happens in an organized binder classroom is this is the second step of the routine. This is Coalinga, another district in California. And I know that these middle school students are on the second step of the routine because it's that green C page. So even though the model is happening from up front, right, that class sample, because we're engaged collectively in the same predictable routine every day, the binder is just the tool to engage in the routine. So it's not even about the binder, it's just the tool to participate. And by doing so, now I have, let's say I have 30 students in the room, and I'm a student who's sitting there. I have the visual up front, and I have 29 other reminders about where we need to be, right? So, this modeling piece, if we all have the same materials collectively, can really have an impact. And I used to refer to it as like this routine and modeling has an inertia to it. And then I read this paper a couple years ago. It's not in book 1. I got this on my hands on this after I wrote it, but it's really interesting that even subtle forms of attention and inattention can be passed from one student to the other. And the authors refer to this as an attention contagion, like the spreading of attention or attentive or inattentive behaviors in a way of disease or a virus or a disease spreads. And when we think about this, it's usually framed in the inattentive behavior, right? We've all had that experience where classroom management issues breed, right? They start to spread. But what happens if you can clearly um, model attentive behavior, both yourself as the educator that's in up front in the class, let's say, if that's what you're saying, but all those models around, you actually start, that's that inertia, that momentum to this, where it starts to spread attentive behavior as opposed to inattentive. And then routine. If you look at the subtitle of the book, Creating Safe and Predictable Learning Environments, you'll see as you get into this, I spend a lot of time on the routine. In fact, the whole book is framed around the routine. Each chapter is a different step in the routine because I believe the more predictable the learning environment, the safer it feels for students. And that's particularly true for students whose lives outside of school are anything but predictable and might skew towards chaotic, right? And it's hard, it can be hard to remember that we may not know the trauma or the chaos students are navigating in their lives at home and their personal lives outside of school. And so the impact of a space that I can depend on that's predictable, students can engage. They can let their that affective filter down that Stephen Krashen talks about. And we can't forget that inherent to learning anything new is the risk of failure. And I may not be as likely to lean in and take those risks of failure if I'm not feeling safe. But it also, as Doug Lemov says, is it actually has an impact academically, right? They consider one unmistakable driver of students' achievement carefully built and practice routines. And here's the image you're going to see in the book. And this is kind of back to that thesis of this work. If I can bring about the three keys: clarity, modeling, and routine. Well, if the routine's in place, the binder is just the tool to engage in the routine. Now, notice each step of this routine. You see the beginning routine, and then you see the executive function working memory. Second step, third step. Each day, just by being here and participating in the routine, I get practice doing these skills. That's the Makahana Kaike, while I'm clearly seeing the model because there's a class sample that's being used and all of the others, right? So the teacher, once the routine's in place, there's nothing more to do. You just keep doing what you do with your content and curriculum. You can see that circle, teach your class. And we have to protect that sacred time. And as a byproduct, over time, that repetition, students get practice with these skills. And one thing you're going to see throughout the book is I keep encouraging throughout because I've lived this both as a teacher. So the only reason I'm probably here talking to you today, once I designed Organized Binder, never meant to share it. And teachers started showing up to my class because the kids were talking about this binder in Mr. Weathers' class. And I was struggling. So were my students. And all of a sudden, something started shifting. Well, the next year, school wide in ninth grade, my school voted to adopt Organized Binder in every class. Not my choice. But all of a sudden, I found myself in this kind of support role of all my colleagues, which was really interesting. But more importantly, what we all kind of realized was like something shifted. And it was because we got collective and we had the same routine. And so, although I'm going from class to class to class to class, and I tell some stories about this in the book, and there's a different teacher and a different subject and different groups of kids in class and different places on campus, and all that difference is happening, but we committed to clarity, modeling, and routine. And so how you do school looked the same in each class. And I tell some, I think, really compelling stories from students who are now teachers who went to a school that used this, and they have reached out to me. I don't know them. They weren't my students. They didn't go to my school. That the impact it had on. In fact, it happened in New Mexico last week at our break. A student came up with a sheet of paper and she had gone to a school in a different state and she was just talking about the impact it had on her. So this cognitive load, when we get collective, if we all have the same clarity, modeling, and routine, is significant because cognitive load relates to the amount of information working memory can hold at one time. And since working memory has a limited capacity, instructional methods should avoid overloading it with additional activities that don't contribute to learning. Okay, so when we look at cognitive load and working memory, if you will, for me, that green brain represents a student's working memory capacity. And we have three kind of overview types of memory. Of course, we have our short-term memory, temporary holding spot, and then it's gone if you don't use it. We have our long-term memory, which is not finite, it's infinite. And of course, is the destination of all the things we're teaching and learning. We want it to end up there. But we also have something called working memory, which is kind of synonymous with short term memory, but it's different in that it's not a passive holding place. It's an active spot. And it's what you're using right now, right? It's where we're thinking. It's that active cognition that's happening. And the more times I get to do that with my working memory, the more exposures I have to with what I'm learning, the more likely it is to move into a student's long-term memory, right? So if we can flex a student's working memory through retrieval, the better. The problem with working memory, that green brain, is that it has a limited capacity. And the most current research I've read recently this year is that researchers, they argue about it, but it's like we can hold about four things in our working memory at one time. Some will say six, some will say eight. Um, Either way, it's not a lot, which is why multitasking doesn't work. Okay. And so when we refer to cognitive load, we're talking about using some of that bandwidth of our working memory, some of that capacity. And that's a good thing when we consider intrinsic load, because intrinsic load is the things we do as educators. That's learning new information, that's connecting it with stuff I already know. That's the stuff of school, right? Intrinsic load. But you've probably heard the expressions desirable difficulty or productive struggle. Like it can't be too much and it can't be too light, right? There's that art to applying intrinsic load, kind of like the stress on our bones. We know that you need mechanical stress to make your bones stronger. And if you don't have enough of it, they get weaker. If you have too much, of course, they break, right? But here's where we can get collective and have some interesting impact in time to free up working memory capacity because extraneous load is the cognitive load we want to reduce. Okay. And if I'm going from class to class to class to class and everything is different, the teacher's different, the subject's different, students are different, the routines are different, if any, the expectations are different. I'm having to use a significant amount of my mental calories just navigating. But if I get collective, all of a sudden I can liberate that working memory capacity to focus on the things I'm trying to learn. So when I talk about clarity, modeling, and routine, I want you to keep in mind, you'll see it in the book too, this idea of getting collective about it. And it's not just like kumbaya. Collective teacher efficacy is the belief that teachers can more positively impact the learning of their students if they work as a team. And if you follow the research, if you're familiar with John Hattie, which I'm sure some of you are, maybe most of you, invisible learning, they are constantly analyzed. These are all meta analyses. So groups, decades of research, multiple researches on the same topic or strategy and trying to figure out what has the greatest impact on students' success. And guess what ranks at the top? I mean, it's collective efficacy. In fact, one of the appendices in the book, if you look at the back, I align all of the strategies in the book to the effect size to make the point. This is why this is so effective. This is, again, not just made up. These things work, but I've always been empathetic with this one because what do we get collective about if by definition, we're so siloed? Different grade levels, different subjects, different places on campus. Well, we can get collective about clarity, modeling, and routine because it's content and grade level agnostic. And then my final point, Sybil, and then I'm going to hand it off to you. Um, MTSS, RTI, depending on what state you're in. If you're in New Mexico, lots of love to the MLSS state. They're the multi-layered systems of support. Regardless of what you call it, it's the same idea that we need a tiered intervention. This work is meant to be tier one for all kids. I believe that a universal tier one should do one primary thing of others, but one main is to identify areas of need or struggle with students, but mitigate or address those within the tier one space. And by doing so, we can, if something is persistent, like just can't get organized, well, then it's going to be a more authentic tier two intervention, right? And I recently spoke at a state level, it was the opening keynote for a state level MTSS conference. And the person who introduced me said that they, in their state, certain districts had reports of 60 to 70% referral rates to tier two, tier three, and then to special ed. And it's just not, the system's not built for that. But I get it. Like if in the absence of a tier one, what do we do? And a good friend of mine, he's a superintendent in Delaware, says you can't tier two yourself out of a tier one problem. So I'd like you to kind of think about that as you are reading through the book. And I bring that up in the book as well. That's what I have for us today so far, Sybil.
Oh
Hope I
my
didn't take
gosh,
too much
yeah.
time.
You cannot tier two yourself out of a tier one problem. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mitch. I took lots of notes. Did anyone else take any notes? Yeah, I see a couple hands. Awesome. I know when I handwrite, I remember stuff so much better. So I did go ahead and print my note taker and take some notes. Amazing. So we have about 15 minutes now, maybe, yeah, 10 to 12 minutes. And I do want to show you real quick at the end some of the book club um, functions, I guess, how it's going to run, but to ask Mitch some questions, okay? And then like Mitch said, he's going to come back at the end of the book club and we're just going to have a Q&A with him. Like the whole time is going to be Q&A, okay? So hopefully you've gathered some questions now. If not, that's okay as well.
Hmm.
But I'm going to start. And I'm super curious, Mitch, since you've been to so many schools and have the privilege and pleasure to work with so many educators, like what's the most common question that you get? What do educators who are trying to put your practices into place, what do they struggle with or what do they ask you?
Hmm. Well, there's kind of two camps there. That's a good question. If it's an organized binder thing, the nice thing about that is that everything's provided. If, and this, I'll be honest with all of you, and it'd be interesting to get your feedback. And I talk about it in the book a bit too, and open is that one of my fears in writing the book was there's as much as cognitive load is a real thing, teacher load is a real thing. So it's like, oh, great, I love the strategies of this program, and now I have to create a whole program and make these copies and replenish it and restock it. And it's not that you can't, of course you can. And that's the whole point. We have a whole online course, same thing, like with the book. So the questions are different, and I'll just stick
That
to the
makes
other
sense.
one, the non-organized binder one. Is it's really just trying to figure out how do I get that clarity modeling routine and the model, like we all have the same sourcing it. How do we make that happen? Um, but then there's the questions that come up with each step of the routine. I mean, I could go on and on with that, but
Yeah.
I would say it's probably the biggest one. Like if someone's going at it alone, in particular, an individual teacher, um, I will of course support them however I can, but figuring that out and then sustaining it is, again, not insurmountable, but just more work. And the last thing most teachers need is more work to do, whether you're in
Yeah.
K-12 or college. We work with colleges as well, and it's just, teacher load's a real deal.
It definitely is. And maybe we can be each other's teacher efficacy and collective efficacy, right?
Yeah,
Since we're all
yeah,
kind of exploring this together over the next 6 weeks.
absolutely.
Because I love the way that you shared with us that you did it yourself in your classroom. It's amazing that students were the ones saying, this works, we've got to
Right.
do this. That's absolutely incredible, right? Testament to the work. But then it became the bigger picture. And I think that's important for us to all remember. And that worked really well for me a lot of times in my own classroom was to just do it myself and get good at it. Right. And then other people will start hearing about it and see it rather than trying to be like, we all have to do this. Right.
Right.
Because, like you said, we all have a lot on our plates and our teacher load's full. So, really starting together in this book club, but also in your own classroom and seeing what you can make happen. I love that that's your story as well,
I
Mitch.
do
You
have
were just
one
doing it.
one other one that I would say is probably most common in even a group like this, if you're new to this, is where do I start? If I had to
Mhm.
pick one of the executive functions or one of the strategies, and I'll just tell you what I always respond is organization, and which would be the third step of the routine. You'll see this when you jump in the book with the table of contents and the toolkit. There's just something really grounding about getting organized. So if you were, that's a really common one, Sybil, is where do I start? If
Awesome.
I had to pick one, you could roll all of it out, but if you had to pick one, that's like the first, I think, starting place. So
Yeah, that makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. Thank you. Does
mhm.
anyone want to ask a question or two? We have a few minutes here. If you want to just raise your physical hand or a digital hand, and unmute yourself, or you're welcome to put a question in the chat if that's more comfortable for you as well. Um, give a little bit of wait time, and that's okay if there's not any questions at this time as well. Oh, yeah. Is it Kaina?
Oh, China.
Kina.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kina, what's your
Yeah.
question?
Um, so the whole time, that I'm like hearing this, right? I'm like, oh yes, I love this. Like, I can see all the ways that it's gonna work like so well for my students. I'm wondering, is there like a takeaway that teachers have found that is like kind of like a surprise? Like they don't, it's like an unexpected benefit from like practicing like this model?
Hmm. These are good questions. Usually I do this and I'm like, I've heard that question before. Akina, that's a new one. An unexpected byproduct. I mean, I think some of um and I'll even speak from my practice when I was first trying to design some of this. One of the things that kind of really stood out to me was the decrease in classroom management, which was not the reason I was doing it. Although I had some serious classroom management issues, we had school-wide issues. It was a pretty lively place to teach when I first got there. Um, but I just started seeing students for the first time who just, it was really, they just were enjoying themselves. And I think it was that experience of, I actually know how to do this. I'm doing this in this class. And that's what I think made them start talking to other teachers. Like you said, Sabo, it's like they literally, teachers started showing up and like, the kids won't shut up about this binder in your class. They love your class. They love the binder. I'm, what is this binder? I'm like, well, I'm, you know, trying to work on these things. And here's what's kind of evolving from that work. And so that, at least for me, was kind of an unexpected, like, oh, and it's funny, as a science teacher, I'd have students that they loved being in my class. And I think it was more about this stuff than the biology, right? But some of them would be like, I'm going to major in biology. And I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea. I know you love my class and you're having fun, but I think it's all this stuff. I'm not sure that's the route you should go. And of course, I never explicitly said that. So that was one piece. One thing I can tell you that is, again, not expected is the family piece and how much they appreciate what's happening. Because, and I can say this loud and clear now as a dad of a 16-year-old who's a sophomore in high school, and it is not an organized binder high school, and it's a large, comprehensive Title I public high school here in Sacramento. And I'll just be honest with all of you, most of the time I'm like, what the hell is going on in those classrooms? Like, what? Like, so I can say when I've gone, I remember being in the classroom and giving, how you have open house, or which is the one at the beginning? I always get them mixed up. Open back to school night? Back to
Yeah,
school
back to
night.
school
Yeah, that
night.
makes sense. Back to school. And you do your like 10-minute spiel at least as a high school teacher. And have all the parents that come in and this is what about. And I remember like, wow, these parents, and I'm a pretty nice person. I talk to people, whatever, but they really were appreciative. They come up afterwards. And guess what I didn't do? I didn't talk about, I would list all the standards. I'd put a slide up and I'm like, here's everything we're going to try to get through this year. We won't get through all of it. If you want to talk further about that, like you love this, here's my email. Let's set a time. And then I would hand them all an organized binder. I'm like, I want to introduce you to how this classroom is going to run so you can know your kids' goals. You can see their work, you know where to find it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd have parents coming up afterwards thanking me, all this. And I just never put it together. It's funny until recently going to other back to school nights and I'm leaving these things going like, oh my gosh, like I don't have, I'm worried, like my kid tends towards ADHD. How is she going to pay attention in this class? Like, so I guess those were, if that gives you any indication.
Yeah, that was Awesome. I feel like I'm hearing it's kind of like a systems like level like change, like the quote
Mhm.
that you mentioned before of like you can't tier two yourself out of a tier one problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, the proactive behavior management, it's like really cool. So
Yeah.
thank you.
The bet, and I can tell you one takeaway that might only be my experience is that, and it also shows how old I'm getting, but having those students who are now teachers that are writing in saying, "Hey, I used this program and my students desperately need it. I realized this is where I learned how to organize myself. I learned how to keep a calendar and whatnot." So
Yeah,
there's
powerful
some
for the
takeaways.
teacher in the
Yeah.
room too to learn that, to use it for sure.
And the other thing you'll learn as you're going through this is just, we talk a lot about students with this work. This is about the teacher too, because teachers struggle with executive dysfunction as well. And I unpack this in the book that when I've seen it, and we all do to some degree, right?
Mhm.
But if a teacher struggles, it exacerbates the issues for the kiddos in that space that also do. So it's
Yeah,
also about what's going on with the teacher. But I'm going to be
makes
quiet
sense.
now because I feel like I'm
Okay.
taking too much time.
No, no. Oh my gosh, this is what it's about. There's a question from Lisa. Is there a study or article that shows a correlation to classroom behaviors related to teaching EF?
Yeah, it's the book you have in your hands, but I could find you. No, um,
Perfect.
the I could try to dig up a specific research paper, Lisa. Um,
She
yeah,
wants to
but
share it with
that's
the
really
teachers
a
she
big part
supports.
of, I make that point loud and clear in the book of saying when students start to develop this sense of agency, this sense of capacity, that there is, and some of that is also freeing up working memory, right? If my working memory is taxed out, I have no bandwidth available to manage my own behavior. That's that inhibition, which is a core EF, right? Can I inhibit my own thoughts to stay focused? Can I block out like it? So some of it is that engagement, the clarity, the routine. I know what's expected of me. That's a big takeaway with special ed directors. Are like, we walk classes and it's so clear. And our teachers that are going in to support kids with IEPs, if they can't figure out the expectation, how's this kid going to figure it out? So it's all kind of swirled up, in my opinion, in classroom management and behaviors. That modeling piece, the attention contagion, feeling like I can do this. I tell some stories about amplifying that too, like the story of the gold stars you'll read about, like spotting those aha moments and celebrating them. So I'll keep an eye out and I'll look for you. But let's talk, and if you, maybe what you have in your hands could be the that thing to share. It might be the piece.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm going to share my screen real quick here just to make sure everybody is organized, right? I'm trying to model how this is going to go in our book study. So I did send out the Zoom link outside of the group today just to make sure if anyone hadn't entered, they could join us. But all the Zoom links are here in the calendar, okay? So you can see I've scheduled for the next 2 weeks, 2 different time zone book studies. They're going to be repeating, okay? But I'm trying to meet different time zones. And I just figured we'd try that for 2 weeks and see how it goes, who can come at those times or not. And then we could adjust for the following weeks if some people are like, I really want to come, but I can never make it. Everything will be recorded when it's in large group, but we won't, if we go into breakout rooms, you can't record that, I don't think. But those will be recorded and shared as well. So the community is here. Each week I'm going to pin, so you'll see at the top, these are pinned. The note taker on Monday, and when the calls are, what you're going to need, the details there. Okay. I want to hold you accountable a little bit because we know that you'll learn more the more actively you participate with us. And you are going to earn a 30-hour continuing education certificate by participating. So I want you to post your notes each week. It might be on the digital planner that I've made for you. If you want to make a copy of this, you can use this if you like to type right in here. You could print it. That's what I did. So here's the kickoff. Here's what this week we're working on, chapter intro and chapter 1. So I just printed it. I just also used the back, or you could make a copy and type right on here. Okay. Or if you do notes on sticky notes or in a notebook, however you want to do it. But if we can get active participation, you're posting those notes, we can have conversations, see how things are going, and that will help keep you accountable for actually showing up live or watching the replays and participating with us, because you will learn more if you're more active. The more you put in, the more you're going to take out. Okay. And I want this to be really powerful for your learners. And then in the classroom, it's all stored there too. So I'll put it on a post, but if you don't want to like stream through the posts, you can go to the second one, the Executive Functions Book Club, and you can see the folder here. So this is our how-to guide, what we're going to do. This is week 1. That post I just showed you is repeated here and linked here. Okay, so everything's going to happen in the community, and then it gets placed into the classroom at the same time. Okay, so if you want the fast route, you're just going to go here to the classroom and go to our Executive Functions Book Club. Okay, we also have a map. Look, we have people all over the world here. It's kind of cool. So we have educators all over the world joining us in this community. School is also gamified. I'm going to be asking you guys, like, are there some prizes you'd like to win to kind of try to motivate you to participate? The way you get points and move up on the 7-day, 30-day all-time leaderboard is just by liking and commenting. So if you liked this post, it gives you a point. If you comment and then you like somebody else's post, but it's cool because you're liking other people's posts. You're giving points to other people. The way you get points to up level is by giving to other people. And what will happen is different classrooms in here will unlock when you get to different levels. Okay, so you can unlock all the past book clubs that we've done. Our last one was, anyone know Andrew Hallam? He wrote Millionaire Teacher, Expat Patriot. I like to talk about money because I don't think educators talk about money enough. But we did this book club about the book called Balance, How to Invest and Spend for Happiness, Health, and Wealth. And his videos are in here, all the replays are in here and everything. So it's kind of fun to motivate you, to get you to unlock some of the different aspects in here. Okay, so in a nutshell, communities where the posts will be happening. The classroom, our book club is here, the second tile. The calendar is where you're going to grab the Zoom links. They show them in your time zone. So that's nice because it's tricky. And then the leaderboards, if you kind of get into the gamification and unlocking some of the classrooms, etc. Okay. So in a nutshell, that's what it is. Right now, our main focus in the Burn Bright Club is this book club, but I will also be posting wellness, taking care of ourselves, kinds of self-care things as well periodically, because I can't help myself. I need the reminders, and I know you probably do too. So there is a mix of our professional lives and our personal lives in the Burn Bright Club. Anyone have any questions? I see there's a little bit of chatting going on. But this has been amazing. Where should we post the kickoff notes from today? Okay, good question. So that is going to be, this is all part of chapter week 1. So on this first post, you can just go here and you can say my notes or whatever you want to tell us. And then you can click this little paper clip and you can pick your file, your picture or whatever you want to do, and push comment. So that's where I want you to post them, is on this pinned post. Okay, and then others of us can comment and like and respond, that kind of thing. Okay, I cannot get out of this post for some reason. I'm almost leaving the Zoom on accident there. Okay, good question. Anything else before we sign off? Get you on with your day?
I'll say one thing besides thanks, everybody. I mean, this
Yes.
is a huge honor that you're engaging in a book study with this book for me. But if you happen to have a copy in front of you and you flip to page 168, um,
Oh, we should
I
take a
am
picture.
coming back in 6 weeks. But if you have questions or comments or thoughts, anything you want to bounce off me, I've put my personal email in the back, which I thought was a really good idea when I was writing the book. I'm not sure it was the smartest move on my part. The book just passed 7,000 copies sold, so I've received quite a few
Congratulations.
emails. And I remember Core when I asked them, I'm like, "Can I do this?" Like I'd never written a book, and they were like, "Sure." And I remember them saying like, "Well, it's got to do this to be a bestseller." And I remember thinking, I just can't even fathom that, wrap my head around it. And so, but I would love to hear from you too. So we're all friends now because we're in a book study together. So anyway, that's
Yeah.
me. You can get a hold of me, and I promise I'll reply very quickly. I take that very seriously. So,
And you should, can you share in the chat your newsletter link to you? I
oh, if
highly
you want to stay in
recommend.
the loop, yeah, I know some of you are
Yeah.
looking. Let's see.
Mitch has got a great newsletter and he lets you know when his classes are and different
Yeah, I
things.
just did one today, like the hour before we met. I gave a free class. I do it like every 2 months. Um, but if you just go to the website, organizedbinder.com, and then I think it's right in them, there's a light green bar that says sign
Yeah,
up.
I
We
think
don't
it pops
spam
up.
you, we don't over email you. It's really if there's something, most of the time, it's like, here's something free that's happening that's really going to be helpful, you might be interested in.
Amazing. You know what would be fun? Let's take a picture. Should we hold our books up and take a picture? With
Sure.
Mitch is right in the middle on my screen right now too, so it's perfect. So turn your camera on if you want to join the picture. Yay, we got people joining us. I'll tell you when we're gonna do it. I'm gonna do it old school wise. Oh, I love that. It's on your phone. Okay, 1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay, let me just drop that in real quick and then I'll put it in the group too. But if you guys want to grab it, if everyone's okay with that being shared, or is there
Sure. I
anybody who
don't
would
mind.
prefer that as not shared, kind of outside the group? Either way is fine, but there it is.
We have some blurry books too. I love it.
Yeah, because of the background. Awesome. Yeah, the blur. No worries at all. Okay, well, thank you so much, Mitch, and thank you
Thanks,
everyone who
everybody.
showed up here live, who's watching the replay, who is joining us for the book club. Um, let's do this. I'm really, really excited about it. I'm more excited now than I was even before we started. So I appreciate you all. And feel free to DM me within school if you have any questions, post them in the group. Um, I can also give you my email real quick here. It's just sybil@sybilhall.com. Oops, I spelled it wrong. SYBIL. That's not going to work. There we go. Okay, thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks,
If you want to
everybody.
unmute and say goodbye, feel free. Appreciate you all.